Hi, this video series is titled Controlled Flooding of the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta, and it's a review of 110 years of both accidental and intended or controlled flooding of the Delta Islands. Are the Delta Islands really at risk for flooding due to excess rainwater in 2011? The answer is no. This video series is going to show you why. In summary, over the last 110 years, there have been both controlled and accidental flooding of the Delta Islands due to high rain and water flow. However, in the last 30 years, the management of water flow through the Delta has become so much more controlled, and the levees have received substantial improvements so that the likelihood of an accidental flood is minimal. What you do hear about is the controlled floods. In fact, you may soon hear about some controlled floods of Delta Islands, and this video series will show you which islands may be flooded and the state planning process and purposes in preparation for that controlled flooding. In addition, this video series provides a brief overview of how the Department of Water Resources issued a report called the Delta Risk Management Strategy, and it contains substantial false or erroneous data regarding current Delta Islands and their levees and their status. And so we want to review all of that, and we're going to start with this first video is about what is the difference between controlled floods or inundations and the accidental ones in the Delta, using a review of correct Delta history. And then we ask, why is this important today? The other videos will be about which ones are going to be flooded and the problems with the DREAMS report. I'm Nicole Seward. I'm a Delta land and business owner and a California attorney, and also a California fourth-generation voter. I care very much about the Delta and the people of the state of California, and I do not want decisions be made on false information. That's why I'm providing this review. So what's the difference between controlled floods or inundations and accidental floods in the Delta? Using review, I'd like to move forward. First of all, you have to understand that the state has been studying this issue greatly for years, and starting in about 2007, there was a $6 million report by URS and a couple others that the state paid for, that reviewed a bunch of Delta history, and they called it Delta Risk Management Strategy Report. DREAMS report is what it's also called. And it covered a bunch of Delta history. The problem with it is it fabricated Delta history regarding flooding. It added islands to the Delta that didn't exist, and several other issues that we're going to go through. And for just one example, because it has to do with all of this, I'm going to look at, this is section 13, and this is a map where the DREAMS report looked at flooding in the Delta. And it says number of failures in the last 100 years, 3 to 5 years for Ryer Island. Well, this is when I first realized, okay, they're making big mistakes. We first saw this map in 2008 with the Delta Vision process, when the Delta Vision folks came to the Delta to let us know they were thinking about making changes to the Delta. And I know Ryer Island hasn't flooded 3 to 5 times in the last 100 years, and if they can be that wrong about this Ryer Island, it made me wonder, well, what is the rest of this report about? So I decided to take a very thorough look at the historical records on flooding in the Delta, and I created a spreadsheet using many different documents as reference here. I'm going to make this larger so that it's a little bit easier for everyone to see it. And you can see that I reference a lot of different documents, and over time, depending what document, what organizations, it would use different time periods. But they would also give the information per per island, specifically for each island in the Delta. So that was very helpful to do a comparison. And what it came down to is, I believe the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, in their 2006 report to Congress, they gave a report regarding the historic levee failures in the Delta, and they used a time period of 1967 to 2004. The reason why they use this time period is because that's when the levees had been approved to withstand the flows, and any prior times to that there had not been this level of levee improvement. So it would be like assessing a current building or structure based on a former one. It just usually is not done. So anyway, this was why the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers report, it said only 31 floods in the Delta. Well, then we look at other agencies, and CalFed is part of DWR. So I looked at, okay, what is DWR saying? So let's take a look here. So in 2005 and 2008, DWR is using this time period, basically over 100-year time period, and they say 158. So, and yet in 2005, DWR, same organization, same year, uses this time period, 1930 to 2004, and they say only 55. Well, what does that show us right here? Even DWR itself recognizes that 2/3 of these floods, if they actually had been in the Delta, 2/3 of them happened before any of the levees are even improved at all for the flood protection. So this shows right here that DWR is just trying to inflate the numbers. Then I decided to look at the more details, because why in the world would this number be so high when everybody in the Delta knows this isn't the case? And what DWR did was add islands that aren't even in the Delta, so that it would totally inflate the numbers to make it look like it's much worse, way worse than it is. So why would they do that? To make California voters think it's time to, oh, the levees are at risk, when in fact they are not. And if you talk to somebody from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they're going to tell you, no, these are pretty well maintained and structured levees. And I'm going to go further in this timeline on that. Why is this all important? Well, because Delta people have been hearing now for the last couple of years that based on, here's an example. This is one of them. This is a report published July 2009. It uses that DRMS information to come up with, evaluating the levees, the probability of failure. They use year of failure probabilities and all that, and then they look at the values of the islands for what they believe. They had somebody value the islands based on who knows what, and they come up with this schedule of islands to save and not save. And if you're on one of those islands that is in the blue, that is very offensive. That's saying if the levee fails, don't repair it. And the other islands, the gray ones, it says repair. Well, I happen to be from Ryer Island, so that's good news. But I also realize that if they can say, hey, repair, don't repair, based on probability and historic levee failures, and they can make up levee failures that didn't exist, they could change this at any point in time. It's just a matter of changing colors, apparently. So I decided that I need to look more into this, and I also notified DWR that they'd made mistakes, at least as to Ryer Island. So it takes about 2 years, but thankfully, I do appreciate it, that DWR does recognize that Ryer Island information, at least, was incorrect. And so they post changes. That report was supposed to be final in 2008, but they post changes in March 2009. However, if you look at the bottom, it was also updated in December 2009. So that earlier levy decisions report that keeps circulating is based on old numbers and old information. And so we go over here, and I'll look further at this, but we see how did they change the maps, and how did they cover the improvements. So I'm going to do another series here. Okay, this is a timeline then. I felt like it was so inappropriate what they had done, that so I went and I looked at Delta floods, and I took a timeline, just Delta floods, not including the Suisun Marsh or any islands outside the Delta. And it is very clear, you can see as time progresses, much less floods, except for in the 1986 time frame, 80 to 86. That is record flood years. And so I'm going to look at that a little bit more in the next video section.